What's up, guys? Nick from the Average Biker Garage, back with another episode of the Average Biker Podcast. Before we get into this week's interview, I've got to give a shout out to last week's guest, Jeremy and Casey of Corn-Fed Customs. Dude, their followers showed up, and their episode did awesome numbers. So, thank you guys. Can't wait to have you back on. And if you guys aren't following them yet, head on over to Instagram, and it's Corn-Fed Customs 317, I think. The picture of the show is still up on my Instagram, of course. So find that, give those guys a follow. They're doing cool shit. So, on to this week's guest. This week's guest is Mark Ferioli. I'm sure that I'm butchering his last name. He is a high school shop teacher who just kind of fell into bike building. Oh, I know what y'all are thinking, that a high school shop is a thing of the past and that shop teachers are extinct. I thought the same thing, and I brought that up to Mark, and we discuss it, talk about it during the interview. So I am a firm believer that we absolutely need more shop classes for our kids. And after talking with Mark, we definitely need more shop teachers that are like Mark. And talking with him about his students and his classes, I could see the passion he had for teaching on his face. You guys won't see that because this isn't a video podcast yet, but I heard it in his voice too, and you guys will be able to hear it in his voice. Now, if we could just talk Mark and his school district into doing a motorcycle build for shop class with the students, I think that'd be cool as shit. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Mark Ferioli. All right. So, give me your name, age, and location.
So my name is Mark Ferioli. I'm 40, and I live in West Bridgewater, Massachusetts.
So, my podcast, we talked a little bit on Facebook Messenger and whatnot. Come on. All right, my dog's in here making. Go on. Okay, lay down. Jeez. my podcast is motorcycle centric, whatnot, and I want to say thank you for answering the little ad I put up. Yeah, I got a lot of response. I was surprised at how well that was received. So, kind of give me your backstory with motorcycles. How long have you been riding for?
So I started riding back in high school, I think when I was a senior, without my parents knowing, of course, because that's how we all start, right? So I snuck out and got my permit, and my brother had a bike, and so he didn't care that I was riding his bike, when my parents were at work, so that was fine. And then eventually it came out years later that I was riding on my brother's bike, and I would take it like down our street. And of course they knew about that, but they didn't know I had a permit and I was stealing his helmet and, whatever. But, and then I didn't really formally have a motorcycle of my own until which is weird because I'm 40 now, until about 5-6 years ago, I bought my first bike. I always just kind of rode other people's bikes off and on, whatever. But I bought a little Honda Shadow VLX 600 for about $1,000, and this is like I found this Facebook page online, the Honda Shadow riders and customs and all that kind of stuff, and it turns out that the Honda Shadow 600 is like the Honda Civic of the world. Like everybody cuts them up, everybody changes them, and but I really like that. Even though everybody has one, it's cool because there's a lot of information out there to do that, and yeah, so I've just been riding, I've been riding, I guess, the technically the better part of my life I just haven't had my own bike until 5, 6 years ago. So
So the Shadow you have, that was actually your first bike?
my first actual bike. Yeah. No.
Huh. Wow. What were you riding in high school? What was your brother's bike?
That was a Kawasaki Vulcan 700. Um, and he stripped that down to the bare bones, made a little tent outside, resprayed the frame, built it all back together, and then he just couldn't get that thing to stay running like really well. It ran well enough, but it just got to the point where he was like, "I'm done." Sold it to a friend of his. His friend really dove into it, got it working pretty well, but then he sold it. But that was a fun bike. It was, the Vulcan was, just a cruiser, a little bit bigger. He had kind of some loud pipes on it, so that was kind of nice. And that was my start to like, ooh, I like this style bike, and I like the sound of it. And it was just, I've always been on like bikes in general, like mountain bikes. I'm a huge mountain biker, so anything with like the two wheels has always been really fun. Whether it be riding somebody's dirt bike or quad or any kind of motorized vehicle or whatever. So, but the bikes have always intrigued me. My dad, he used to ride when he was younger. But he stopped because of how busy everything gets with like the road. And it's even, I mean, it's funny that he says that back then. Oh, the traffic started getting worse, and I had you guys, and it was getting kind of dangerous. And I'm like, man, it's like a million times worse nowadays.
Yeah, it's
So,
it's crazy nowadays. Everyone's got their screen, glued
uh,
to their face as they're driving. It's terrible.
yeah, it's nuts. So I don't ride. I mean, I don't ride every single day. And the 600 for me is just a kind of an around town bike. I take it to or from work, which I'm like 8 minutes to work, and it's tough when you want to do anything. I have a little tiny side bag, but it's not like, oh, let me just run to the store real quick and put my stuff where. So but I like to get out on it and just go for a cruise just to get on it, and feel the wind. So.
No, and those shadows are perfect for doing exactly that.
Yeah, and I'm 6'3". I just put a video out the other day. Somebody asked me like, "Oh, what's it like being 6'3" on a 600? Did you change the controls? Yada yada yada." And I was like, "No, I posted a video up, and it's not the most comfortable as far as longer rides, but I don't go that long on it anyway, so it's a nice, fun, small bike. But on the topic of it being busy and people being on their phones and everything like that, it is a short bike. It's not like like my brother now has a Yamaha Tenere dual sport, and I just rode that the other day actually, and I'm like, wow, what a difference! Like how tall you are and how much more visible you are to everybody else. I feel like on my bike, I'm almost like on a mini bike. I feel pretty low to the ground, but it's all right. We try to be as cautious as we can.
Right. So yeah, I'm about 6'2", so I got my shadow. I fit it on it about the same. I just watched your video actually where you
Oh
are
yeah.
on yours, and you said you only put tens on that thing.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. See, I got 12s on mine.
Yep.
But yeah, that's definitely. I had a buddy of mine comment when I posted pictures of it on Facebook. He's like, bike doesn't look like it really fits you that well. And I was like, well, yeah, I guess not, but I think it looks cool, so whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny if you look up online. Well, when I'm on Facebook customs or whatever, and people post pictures, and it's like that doesn't look too comfortable, and it's like, well, especially when you get those drag bars on there, it's like, no, it's not, but it's fun to just rip around on for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not really made to be comfortable. They're made to look
Right.
cool while they're sitting there.
Right. Exactly.
So so your current stable of bikes is actually that is only the Shadow.
Yep, I've only had the Shadow, and then whenever my brother has whatever bike he's riding, I usually take his out for a spin. He had one a while back. I don't remember what he had. I just remember it was like an engine on two wheels. It was like I don't know if it was I think it was a four-cylinder inline, and I'm just not used to how wide it was. I got on it and I instantly was like, I don't feel comfortable doing this. The bike is weird. I don't like it. I don't like the geometry. It was, I don't know. My dad said the same thing, and he was very concerned about him because he's like, he says he likes it, but man, that thing is just awkward to ride, and you want to be comfortable so you can get out of a situation if you need to. But um, It didn't last too long. I don't know. I have to ask him what it was. But he got rid of that, and now he's on that Yamaha dual sport, which is pretty nice. His wife has a BMW dual sport. They live out in Colorado, and
Oh, nice.
oh, dude, it's like he sends me pictures all the time. So I just got back from a trip out to see him. We did a bunch of mountain biking, but we took the dual sports out and we rode all the way up the top of this mountain, Pikes Peak in the background. Um, yeah, dude, pretty awesome. And they got the whole setup. I mean, they can go camping. They do like 100+ mile trips out in the mountains, and they can camp and they can bring all their stuff with. Yeah, so he's living the life out there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, I hear Western Colorado is just beautiful to ride.
It's crazy. I mean, I can send you. I'll have to send you some pictures or something like that. But it's just so cool because we don't have that. I mean, Massachusetts, we don't really have that. We have some in Western Mass, but you get up in the elevation up there, it's just like snow-covered mountains in the background, and yeah, it's just cool. Beautiful country.
Nice. Yeah, definitely is. I'd like to get out there sometime. Well, what uh what made you choose the Shadow as the platform
Well,
to build on?
it was. I had no real intentions of buying a bike and really getting after it. It just hit me one day. I'm like, you know what? Like, I kind of want to look for a bike. Like, I've been thinking about it for a long time. There's got to be some sort of cheap bike out there. Let's just poke around on Facebook Marketplace. And I got on there, and within like a second, I found this bike a couple towns over. And I was like, ooh, I can get them down to a pretty cheap price. It's a 93, and it wasn't, it's not like it's the newest bike in the world. And it wasn't like a shiny, crazy bike. I mean, it's in good condition, but I wouldn't call it a show bike by any means. And so I just bought it because it was there. When I got there, it sounded good. He had already cut the baffles out, so it doesn't sound like a sewing machine anymore. But not necessarily a straight pipe. It's not like it's super annoying, but it's loud. It's loud enough for people to hear me, that's for sure, and for it to sound good. And so when he started it up, I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And I sat on it. It was comfortable. And I even asked him, I go, is this too small for me? And he was like, I don't know. That's up to you. He just wanted to make the sale. So,
Right.
and I said, $1,000. And he was like, all right, that sounds good. And I was like, for $1,000, honestly, I can probably just turn this right around and pretty much get my money back. And it's going to be fun to ride for a while. And I've kept it. And then I just kind of started looking around on, maybe I think I was on Facebook one day and like the page like popped up. You know how it is. You start talking about motorcycles and it's like, oh, motorcycle stuff. So, and I saw a bobber and I randomly saw it and I was like, whoa, that looks pretty cool. And then I started poking around and I was like, oh, people just do this. Like, this isn't like, well, you can pay somebody, but it's like for the most part, people are just doing it. And I was like, oh, I should look into this more. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. One of these days, I'm just going to do it. And it took a few years. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, I got time. Let's do this. I'm doing this. So it wasn't like I bought the bike with the intention of doing it. It just happened to be there's a lot of people out there that customize Honda Shadows. So
Yeah, that's kind of the path that I went down with it too. I had originally bought the bike for my girlfriend and then started looking, well, let's make it a little bit louder and looking at pipes and whatnot for it. And then eventually, like, you found the Facebook groups, and I believe you got a TJ Brutal Fender on there, right?
yep,
Yeah, I got found his site and was like, whoa, and started seeing some of the pictures. I was like, these things are cool once you cut them up and add stuff to them.
yeah.
So it's very cool, very similar route we took there. So what different mods did you do to it? And modifications.
So the first one was the classic, get out the Sawzall and cut the rear fender off the rear frame. So that was the biggest thing. And what really actually stunk because this took me down. I guess the path was going to happen anyway, but I cut the rear frame, and it was actually right before the pandemic hit. It was just, I just made the decision, okay, I'm going to do it. So I cut the rear frame off, and it was like the pandemic hit. And I was like, okay. And as a teacher, we were out for 2 weeks. Oh, we're going to be out for 2 weeks, and then we'll be back afterwards. And then I kind of started messing around with the motorcycle a little bit. And then the pandemic turned into we didn't even go back to school. So we had to kind of figure out how to teach online, and everybody was going through all that. And at the same time, my wife was like, oh, we should look into residing the house. So I had somebody come by and they were like, oh, yeah, it's going to be this amount of money and you're going to have to wait because we're booked up. And I was like, oh, okay. So just like the motorcycle, I started YouTubing, resodding the house, and next thing I know, the motorcycle took a back seat and the house got resided by me all summer, so what happened was and what I was leading up to is I cut the rear frame and that's it. I couldn't ride the bike for however time because there was no tail light, there was no license plate. Um, and so the bike sat. Well, fast forward a year basically. I got the rear fender on and everything was cool, but the bike sat, the carburetor sat, and it just wasn't running that good. So, but we'll get to that in a minute. But the first mod was getting that frame cut, and that's the first video I made, and that was kind of like, oh, I'm getting towards the end of the school year here, and I kept posting random YouTube videos on woodworking, on metalworking, on welding, and I have to watch the whole thing. I have to scrutinize it, make sure there's no swears in it, um, to post it for the high school kids. And it was kind of tough. And it was like I had something in my mind, and it was like, oh, I can't really find exactly what I want to show the kids. And I was like, I should just start filming everything I'm doing at home, and then I'll post it for the kids. And then it's like it's me on the video, not some random person online. So they're more apt to watch it. And then I make a quiz based off of it. So that's how I started. That's why I created my YouTube channel, and that's why a lot of the motorcycle stuff is on there. And then so I posted the motorcycle stuff, and then I posted a few other things, but the motorcycle videos were like shooting through the roof. Obviously, my students were watching it because they had to. Um, but I started posting stuff on Facebook, and oh man, like the very first thing about cutting the rear frame off and attaching the solo seat. That was my first video. That was technically my first mod. Um, and I looked everywhere on how to attach a solo seat to a Honda Shadow 600. And I found a ton of videos that was just like, oh, the frame's cut off and I got the seat on. And I was like, well, but all of a sudden you went from one frame to another and the seat was already on. I was like, well, but what about the middle part? And I'm someone that just like, I'm very visual learning, and sometimes I need to see like every step. And once I see every step, then I can modify how I'm doing it. But I need that starting point, right? So my inspiration behind making YouTube videos was record every single step that you do. So it was like step one, unbolt the seat. Step two, here's how you take the panels off. Here's how you take the tail light off, and a lot of people might know that, but there's a few out there that maybe don't, or a little bit afraid. Oh, I don't want to pull on this panel. I don't want to break it, or where I'm missing a screw, I feel like, or whatever. So the first mod was right from the beginning. I had my wife filming, and here I am, kind of It's kind of funny if you watch that video. I'm like, okay, here I go. I'm taking the Sawzall to the frame, and I cut it long because you can always cut more off. But it was cool, and I just left it all out there, and I was like, guys, listen, like I'm a woodworker. I went to school for woodworking. I build furniture, but here I am cutting up my motorcycle, and I wanted to kind of take the angle that like, yeah, just do it, and obviously I'm videotaping this to help ease the anxiety of taking a saw to your bike or whatever, but um, yeah, so it's cool. So my message on all my videos is like, if I can do it, you can do it. Come on now. I'm just like, if you can swing a hammer, right, you can do anything really. So yeah, getting that solo seat on there. I think let me look it up really quick. That video, um, let's see.
13,000.
It's something like that. It went it went up pretty fast because I think everybody was doing the same thing as me. I need to find a video and that shows everything. It is. There you go. So 13,000. Well, you know more about it than I do. Oh no, that was the
Like I
Fender one.
said, was it the vendor one? I was gonna
That was the
say,
Fender one. Oh no, no,
I
no.
just
So
checked out your channel.
the solo seat installation is 21,000. So
Holy shit!
so and I think it's because everybody does the same thing. I found out that okay, there's a bunch of videos out there, but I showed every single step of the way. I even included my old shop teacher who I took over for, which was a cool story about my teaching career. But he's got, so I know how to weld, but because of school, but we have flux core welding at school, which is pretty messy. So he's got a gas MIG welder. So I took it to his garage just because it's a cleaner weld, just for splatter all over the place, that kind of stuff. So he's in the video, and I told him I was making it for the kids, and so he was more than happy to help out. So that was cool. Um, but yeah, I was like 21,000 views. I'm like, well, that's actually pretty cool. But I looked into like, geez, how do I get paid for this? But you need subscribers and you need more than just views. So
Yeah. You're halfway there. I think you got like 500 subs, right?
let's like I'm like, oh, let me look this up. I'm like, I can't even figure that. Oh, 515. Yep. Geez, again,
Uh,
this is like how bad I am with the internet stuff. I feel like an old man.
Hey, I'm not far behind you, bud. It's terrible.
So it's pretty cool, and I do like doing it. It takes up a lot of time, like videoing a process of building something, and sometimes it's like, man, I just want to get it done. But with the motorcycle, now that I've had people view it, I feel like it's like I got to. That's the one thing that if I'm going to do something, videotape it, and post it up because I think people really like it. And it's funny. I get some questions. I try to reply to them, and um, but it's cool. And I don't do anything fancy. I do it all on my phone and edit with whatever video editing software comes with the phone. And I don't do any weird pan in, pan outs and graphics. And it's basically raw footage that I put together. So
No, that's awesome that you do it all on your phone too.
yeah, because I'm not about to buy any extra. I mean, it's like I have a Honda Shadow. Like I don't have $1 million here. So
Right?
to spend on, and the phone on it, honestly, I mean, we all know that nowadays the phones they're pretty good as far as video is concerned. So,
Right.
but yeah, man.
What other mods you do to the bike?
Um, so wait, what was that question?
What other mods,
Oh, what
modifications
much?
you
So
did to
then
the
there
bike?
was there was the rear fender. So you mentioned TJ Brutal. He's got a bunch of stuff on there, and so the rear fender. I was a little disappointed with the rear fender when I got it, but he was also one
Too.
of the cheapest ones out there. Um, and so basically, if you really add up the time, my time versus how much a product cost, I think it would have been the same if I spent a little bit more money on somebody else's fender. Um, but at the same time, though, if I can do the work versus just spending the money, plus it ended up being a good video. When I got the fender, it had a bunch of parallel lines on it from when it was shaped, and then it never got completely smoothed out. So
I believe his fenders are spun, and that's what gives them that. They're not
okay.
like hand rolled. I'm a welder, not necessarily a metal worker, but I believe because I got which fender did you get? The short one or the long one?
Short one.
See, I got the long one on my bike, and it was the same way, and I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they spin his fenders.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just got the ridges because of that, and honestly, it wasn't any miss like I don't want to talk bad about his site or whatever. I mean, I think he's fine. I think he's doing a good thing, and it wasn't misleading. And I went back on the site and I'm like, yeah, you can see him in the picture online. They're there. Um, but honestly, so I made a video on fixing the fender, and all I did was take my palm sander that I use for woodworking, and or actually, I took my grinder with a sanding pad on it, which was more aggressive. Did a light sanding, take my palm sander, sand it all up, and just got the grooves out of it. And then I just put a bunch of heavy coats of primer on there and sanded them, and then painted it. So, but what I did as far as mounting it, basically what you do is you buy the brackets that go onto the rear shock. Um, at least that's how I kept my rear shock. So I wasn't about to make a hardtail. My back is bad enough. So
Oh, come on, man, come on!
I know, not really the true
You
bobber,
got to
but
go all the way with it, man.
so I installed the fender, and then it was like, oh, how do you keep the fender from wobbling all over the place and hitting the rear tire? Well, you put the little struts on the back, but I was like, I'm trying to keep it as clean as possible without having the struts. So I installed the brackets, and of course, the fender would fall down and hit the tire. So what I did was I modified on the bracket, I took two little aluminum blocks and I mounted them to the bracket so that when the bracket falls down, the aluminum blocks hit the frame, and that's it. It doesn't, because no matter how much you tighten that bolt, the bracket can move, the fender can move. And that's why people put the struts on there. So I made two little blocks that come down and would hit the frame up underneath the seat, and that's it. So the fender couldn't go down any lower. It won't hit the tire. It doesn't necessarily bounce around, at least not that I know anyway, not that I hear anyway. And when I'm done riding, it didn't like shift up at all. It wants to just go down, but it can't go down. And it's a cleaner look. So if you look at my bike, there's no fender struts. And I've had people ask, how did you do that without struts? Doesn't it hit the tire? And I'm like, made these little custom blocks, you know? So that was cool. And it just gives you, you know, ultimately in the end, I haven't put a sissy bar on, but I think I want to add a sissy bar, one for looks and a short one, just a little stubby guy, to add an extra brake light up there, because I put the little side brake light on down by the axle, and that's cool and all, but I don't know. Nowadays, I think a little bit more lights. I mean, I don't need to have like these crazy looking things on there, but I don't know. I would just feel a little safer if I could have an extra brake light up there. And I've done a bunch of research online. I looked at a bunch of different styles. People have tall ones, short ones. It's just a matter of finding a good brake light that I would want as well. So yeah, so that was the two. No, that was the second biggest mod that I did. And then, yeah, man, so the carburetor, it sat. So let me tell you about my carburetor tale of woe. This was like more money than I wanted to spend. Me trying to do it myself and save money ends up more money in the long run, you know? So
Funny
I
how
went.
that works sometimes.
Yeah, right. So, I should have known. I knew, like, I was like, oh, the carburetors are gummed up. I got to take them out. I poked around online about cleaning them yourself, and I started looking at it, and I said, nah, my skills only go so far. So, and so I took it out, brought him to a guy, had him clean them, and he was like, yeah, you know, they weren't bad, but they were bad enough, you know, yada yada yada. So I had them cleaned, everything was cool. And then I decided that I liked the look of the hammered-in gas tank with the concave, right? And I was like, all right, that's a pretty cool look. I got some flack for that because my tank was in like perfect shape, and then here I am taking a hammer to it. But
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you. My bike is what I want to do. So I hammered it out, and in the process of hammering it out, everything flaked off on the inside, and the tank was like, you could hear it. It was like sloshing around. There was all sorts of like whatever, rust, whatever was in there that flaked off, the coating, if there was a coating. And so I cleaned it out, and I did some YouTubing again, and I went the acid route, the muriatic acid route, and it seemed like it was clean. And then I put a coating in there because I thought you were supposed to put a coating on. The coating is there as if you have any leaks. So I threw a coating in there, and it was like dry for 80 hours before you recoat this whole thing. And I was like, no problem. I let it sit. But up here in Massachusetts, it can get pretty humid, so maybe it wasn't long enough. And so I got it all done. It was dry. I painted it up. I put it all back together. I got the bike running. Everything's running cool. Took it out for some rides. Everything's great. And then like a month later, it was starting to go downhill. I'm like, oh, it's going back to bogging out again. This is bad. Got to the point where it wouldn't even run anymore. And so I brought the carburetors back to the guy to pay him again. Like, I don't know how many hundreds of dollars it was, you know. He goes, dude, I don't know what you did. He goes, I've never seen a carburetor this bad before. He goes, I was digging out the stuff out of the bowls. It was like a shellac I've never seen. And I was like, man, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. And it got down. We finally came to the assumption that it was Pour 15 that I used to put inside the tank, that it just never cured fully, mixed with the gas, got into the gas line, and just settled in the carburetor.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, dude. So he was like, I had to run it through the machine like 2 or 3 times. I let it sit in the machine overnight. I let some solution sit in there or whatever. He's like, I got it out. He goes, it was a lot of work, but my suggestion is just give the tank to somebody and have it cleaned. And I was like, well, that's where I'm going now. And so I found a guy out in Oregon, and they specialize in dipping. And actually, they don't really do motorcycle tanks. They do like like tanker trucks, full car frames, like big stuff, you know. But I called him and we talked for like 20 minutes. The guy was super. And I wish I knew him off the top of my head. I plugged him in one of my videos when I do the tank, how not to clean your gas tank. I think I did a video on that, and I plugged him. The guy is like super awesome. His name is Bo, and I sent him the tank, and it was like 120 something bucks, including shipping or something like that. It was like pretty cheap. He cleans the tank inside and out, like completely. If you painted it or whatever, it's like this is not something that it's just a. He doesn't do internal cleaning. He does everything cleaning. So he chemically strips it, and then they bake it, and then they add a rust inhibitor to the whole thing. So when you get it back, it's completely bare steel inside and out. But I'm telling you, it was so clean. The thing was spick and span. I did find there was some, I don't know if I created it or if his chemical bath created it, but there was a small hole in the bottom of the tank. But my neighbor's a welder, so he did a TIG braze and re-brazed the holes. Doesn't leak. Repainted everything up, had the carburetors cleaned again. Haven't had an issue since, especially after I replaced everything in the gas line. So that's the other thing. Again, going cheap doesn't pay sometimes, man, because went on Amazon, got a gas cap. That sucked. It leaked. Bought a fuel pump for like 20 bucks. My bike wasn't running, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe this. Everything is so clean. Why isn't my bike running? It's sputtering. It's dying out. It's doing all the same stuff it was doing when it was clogged. Turned out that the fuel pump wouldn't push fuel because it was a cheapo depot one. And so VLXs can be, I mean, the 600s can be gravity fed. So I gravity fed it, and it was just like, whoop, started right up, runs perfect. And found out that the pump really is more of like a manual, I mean, an auto shutoff, essentially. Like it doesn't really need a pump to run, obviously. But it's nice because if something happens to the carburetor, it's not going to leak gas all over the place unless the pump is actually running, you know? So I haven't put a new pump in just yet. I do plan on putting one in because it's technically, you know, it was built to have a pump in there. But man, it was a long, expensive road cleaning the tank by myself, you know, and but so that kind of stuff. Yeah, especially since I hammered in the sides, which is I think that was one of my better videos. I think it created some seams inside the tank that were really hard to get to. That guy's cleaning process, because he goes, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but we basically have the best process. Or anybody that's going to dip in a tank and let it sit in the solution, and he's like, that's the best process. He actually, the only way to really do that is to actually drill a hole in the bottom of the tank so it can drain properly. So he goes, as long as you don't mind that, you're going to have somebody weld it. Luckily, like I said, my neighbor was able to weld it up. But he did a bang up job. The rust inhibitor, like it hasn't rusted at all. Everything seems cool. So yeah, man. But between hammering out the gas tank, putting that solo seat on there, putting the stubby fender on, those are the biggest mods that I did to the bike. And I had to make I hung my mirrors down from below, my stock mirrors.
How'd you do that?
So
I saw that on your bars, and I can't figure out how to do that on mine.
Well, you can't just screw them in on the bottom. First of all, on the brake side, on the right side, there is no threaded hole in the bottom, so there's that. On the clutch side, there is a threaded hole in the bottom, but it's a lot smaller than the threaded stud on the mirror. So at school, we have a full metal shop, and so I have lathes. So what I did was I just threaded. I turned down on the lathe the right diameter I needed out of some metal stock, and then threaded whatever threads were up on the bottom. I figured out those threads, metric, whatever they were. I threaded that part of the rod into the bike, and then on the opposite side of the rod, I just made it really big, drilled it out, threaded the same threads as the mirror, and then so I just made a tiny little adapter. That way I could put the mirror underneath without buying a new mirror, you know, which I don't even know if I would be able to find a mirror with those right threads unless they came with an adapter. I'm not really sure, but so that's what I did. I made a little adapter on the metal lathe at school. And then
I'll
it
have
worked
to go
out
and look at
What's
mine. gonna have to go out and look at my clutch side after this. You got me curious now. See if I have a threaded hole on mine.
Yeah, I was gonna do the same thing. I was gonna have two mirrors, but there wasn't one on the right side. So, um, the one mirror is fine as long as you can, as long as you can see behind you or whatever. That's cool. But I would have done both, and then it worked out magically. That it worked out that the dented tank, helped when the handlebars are already turned. If I didn't dent the tank in, it would hit the tank. So it kind of fits inside that little groove. And now that I'm saying that out loud, I don't think that matters anymore. Now that I put the 10-inch bars on there, when I had the 6-inch bars and they were lower, that was a problem. Now it's not a problem anymore because of that 4-inch rise. So
Nice.
yeah. So I still have a seat pan I'm going to custom make to put in there, which isn't going to be nothing special, just to cover up the junk underneath there. And then the side panels, being a woodworker, I was going to throw some wood paneling on there because I haven't seen that before. Right now, I'm green and brown as far as the colors, so I guess I would throw some walnut on there. That's a dark brown wood, naturally. The only thing I'm a little concerned about is on the right side where the exhaust is. I know they make like the exhaust spray paint, the high temp paint. They make a clear version of that, and so I'm like, oh, I wonder if that would be a thing if I spray the clear on the wood as a finish on the exhaust side, if that would keep the heat away, if that would protect it. I don't know. I don't know if it would or not. So because if you put regular finish on there, I don't know if the heat would melt it or if it would destroy it, you know.
How close is your exhaust to the side panel?
Not that close. I mean, it's close enough. I mean, it's probably, I don't know. I mean, it's within inches.
Yeah.
It kind of comes down and it goes over a little bit. I'd have to measure it, but somebody was just like, I don't know, the heat just rising up from it, it might do something. But I've since, I gotta finish editing the video, but I've since taken the exhaust off and wrapped it with with the wrap. And so that probably helps a little bit keep the heat away or disperse it enough that it wouldn't be a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a piece of scrap wood, mount it up on there, spray it with regular finish to start, and take the bike for a ride and see what happens. So
I'd think that if the exhaust wasn't melting the plastic side panels or anything, it shouldn't mess with the wood too much.
No, I don't think it's going to burn the wood. I'm just thinking of if it would distort the finish itself and maybe make it, bubble or something like that. But yeah, that's a good point because the plastic, it's not like the plastic on those things is very thick, it's just a thin plastic, so, so I don't think it's really a major concern. I just think that it would be kind of cool because other than that, I know they make custom panels for it, but my whole idea is like, well, I know I can get panels for it, but everybody can get panels for it, like every time I've looked up wood paneling, it's either nothing or it's some guy, some Italian woodworker that made his bike completely out of wood, like some crazy thing or something. So,
right.
So I don't know, it might be kind of cool and different, and it'll be removable. So if I ever sell the bike someday, somebody can take them off and do whatever else they want with it, so,
Right.
Yeah, man.
So tell me about hammering out that gas tank. What led you to do that?
Well, again, now that I like went down the rabbit hole of like, oh, I got this Honda Shadow. Oh, wow, look at all these Honda Shadows that people just like cut up and make it their own. And so once I went down the rabbit hole, I naturally started seeing the hammered in look. And obviously a lot of people would do it because, oh, they crashed their bike and now it's dented. And it's like, well, now let's make it look like it was on purpose. But regardless, I just liked the look, and I lost about a gallon. I used to have about 100 miles per tank. Now I get about 60 miles per tank. But it's a bar hopper. It's a quick like ride around town. And like I said, I don't go super far on it anyway, only because for me it's just not the most comfortable bike to ride long distances. So it didn't matter to me. I just wanted the look and I wanted to do it myself. Even my dad was like, oh man, you just like, how did you know it was going to come out right? I said, I don't know. I just did some research and I just started swinging the hammer. He's like, you just swung a hammer at it? I was like, well, I drew a line, like to know I didn't go too far, and and I was like, but yeah, so I just kind of did it. And dude, honestly, after like the first three hits, you're like, oh, okay, I see how this is gonna go. It wasn't so bad. I did because I was like nervous to just like do it. I did do one side first, and then I videoed the second side. So at least I had some bugs worked out. And I did do it actually. I did do it a little bit differently on the second time around than I did the first time around, and I labeled that in the video. Um, but yeah, that has a lot of views on it as well because I think a lot of people like that look, and a lot of people commented, "Man, I was really afraid to do this, but um, I think again, I tried to really explain my thoughts, my feelings on it, as far as not my feelings on the design, but just my feelings on taking a hammer to your gas tank, and don't be afraid to do it. And here's how I did it, and here's the different types of hammers, and here's the techniques. And I'm like rolling my wrist as I'm like, anything I was doing, I was explaining, and just to kind of ease the listeners or the watchers, I guess, on trying it out if they want to try it out. And yeah, I did get a couple. I had one guy mention about like, oh geez, I can't believe you did that to that perfectly good tank, like what the heck? And I was like, yeah, I know, I get it, but it's my tank, that's what I want to do with it. But somebody mentioned, I don't know why you did this, those bikes are so hard to come by. And I was like, they are? I'm pretty sure they're kind of all over the place and they're not an expensive bike. So I don't know where that comment came from, but
Maybe from a different country, because yeah, I'll hop on Facebook Marketplace right now and you can find numerous
right.
bikes for anywhere from $1,000 up to like three.
Yeah.
They're cheap and abundant.
Yeah. So it could have been a different country. I didn't really look too much into it. I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, it's cool. And I don't really get too much into like battling people on comments or anything like that. I mean, I fully understand what not I'm not comparing myself to a celebrity, but when you put yourself out there to the public, no matter what, there's going to be a critic. And I can actually bring that to my teaching life. I mean, you just can't, you're not going to please every student, you're not going to please every person. So it is what it is. I mean, I know that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to watch the video and get something out of it. So there's probably going to be people that don't like it, but yeah, it's fine. This is my choice, and so I'm happy. Um, but yeah, it came out. I thought it came out pretty good. It can't be perfect because it's a hammer. It's not like one guy commented and he's like, "Well, why did you do all that work when you could just cut out the panel and then reverse them on each side?" And I was like, "Yeah, and it would be perfectly smooth, and then you just have to like clean up the welds." But that's the problem. It's thin
Hmm.
sheet metal. Who knows how to weld sheet metal? Like some people do, and I know how to weld, but not sheet metal. Not that good anyway.
Yeah.
So and I don't want to rely on other people if I don't have to. So a hammer it was. And then with a little bit of Bondo work, it comes out pretty nice. So and then a cheap can of Krylon Spanish moss. That was the color from Lowe's. And so
Spanish moss, huh?
I wanted that like I wanted that I don't want to call it military green, but just that dark forest green. And I got some from my local hardware store, and it looked like garden tool green. It just wasn't like this. It was just not. I sprayed it, and I was like, no, no, I don't like this. This is bad. And I was at Lowe's one day, and I was like, ooh, that looks pretty good. So yeah, so Spanish moss. That's the color of the bike. So um, and then I went online. I bought that 2K clear coat, which works for it's gas proof or gas resistant or whatever. And flat, I went with flat. I went with flat because I like the look of flat. But if you're a finisher on metal, on woodworking, or whatever it is, the more gloss it is, the easier it is to see any imperfections. However, the higher the payoff for the most part, like, ooh, everybody likes shiny stuff. It looks really nice when it's super shiny and smooth. But if you're going to do gloss, it's got to be perfect. But fortunately, I mean, I love gloss, but let's be honest, somebody else said this online. Oh, it's a good 20-yard bike. Looks good from 20 yards away.
Uh,
So,
she's a
I
10 from
mean,
20.
yeah. So I didn't bring this down under the frame. I didn't sandblast it. I kind of like scuffed it up, repainted the frame as I could. But if you get up close to this thing, you're like, oh yeah. I mean, it's cool. You did a pretty good job, but like, it's
It's
not a
a
brand new bike. You
it's a
know,
Honda Shadow.
it's a
Yeah.
Honda Shadow. How much time am I really spending on this thing? Um, but I like the flat look, and it wasn't an excuse to do a worse job. I do like the look of flat, flat colors or whatever. So it just worked out. And dude, if anybody's wondering if 2K clear coat works, it works. So when I cleaned my gas tank for the first time, I didn't realize I screwed up my original gas cap. And so I put a little gas in, I started it up, and I was like, yes, the bike runs. Let's go. And right down to the gas station, filled it all the way up, brought it back, was super excited to show my neighbor. My neighbor's been like, watching me build it and making, like excited to see it done and all put back together. I get back, shut it off, walk over to my neighbor, come back 5 minutes later to see a waterfall of gas leaking out of the gas cap, right down the tank, right onto the engine. And what happened was when I cleaned the gas tank with that muriatic acid, it got into the gas cap and just ate away at it. And the sealing mechanism just didn't work. So when the pressure builds up in the tank, and I had the tank so full of gas, it didn't just vent like it was supposed to. It built up pressure, and then the gas just like it was just forcing the gas out.
Oh wow.
Yeah, dude. And so I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" I took the gas cap off. I like righted the bike up and everything, cleaned it all off. Went out there the next day. Tank looked perfect.
Really?
Didn't bubble. Didn't do anything.
Huh.
So, so it were. I mean, I put like 4 or 5 coats on. I used the whole can, whatever I could get. I just put that many coats on, and yeah. So if people are listening to this and they wonder if that 2K clear coat works, trust me, it works. So
Nice.
yeah.
So I watched that the gas tank hammer it out video you had on there, and you had one of the coolest lines that I've ever heard. Like right at the end of it, I had to rewind it because I wasn't sure if I heard it. And I wrote it down. You said they don't have to be twins; they just have to be cousins. Talking about the symmetry between the two sides, and I was like, that is the coolest line I have ever heard. Because when I painted my bike, I was like, shit, my scallops aren't even, whatever, and I was like, who's gonna be looking at them the same, at the same time anyway. So when
Right.
I heard you say that, I was like, shit, I'm right. I'm stealing that. Just so you know, I'm gonna say that all the time now. That was one of the greatest lines ever. So
So it's a really good line, but just like you, I can't take credit for it because I heard it from somebody else, right? I was going to school. I went to North Bennett Street School in Boston for furniture making, and one of the pieces I made was a table, and the legs on the table were turned legs, and they had all sorts of ornate stuff on them and everything. And so I made 4 practice legs to start, and the 2 best ones that I had, I'm holding them up like inches away from each other, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, yeah, they're pretty good, but this one's off a little bit compared to this one, and they're not exactly the same. And a guy comes walking over, one of the other students I think I was a third year student and he was a fourth year. Either way, he was ahead of me. He comes walking over to me and he goes, dude, they don't have to be twins. And then he pulls my hands apart. They just have to be cousins. And I was like, oh, they're on the same side of the table, but when you're moving your head back and forth and you're looking at them and they're like 3 feet apart, you can't tell. They look exactly the same. So,
and I mean,
uh,
you having built them, you would know that they were there, but the random person coming up and looking at them is never going to be like, oh, well, shit, that's off by 2 centimeters on that side compared to that one over there. Like, yeah, nobody's going to notice that.
so I say it all the time to the kids at school and they get a kick out of it, high school kids. So, um, yeah, and I'm glad. Well, you know what? That makes me feel really good because as a high school teacher, I say stuff to kids, and sometimes it just kind of rolls off their back, and I'm like, "Oh man, I thought that was kind of funny. I thought my delivery was pretty good, but like, so it makes me happy to hear that you picked up on that, and So that's cool. Awesome.
Yeah. These kids nowadays, they ain't got any sense of humor, you know.
Yeah. It becomes a mission sometimes. I'm like, I'll get you to laugh.
Right. All right. You got any plans for another bike build? Looking for another bike?
Um, I don't know, not necessarily a build, more so. So I mentioned my brother's Yamaha that he has, dual sport. The first time I rode that, I was like, oh, this is like a much more comfortable position for me. You know, it's more upright. Um, and then there's just the versatile part of it. So I just went out and visited him out in Colorado, and we went for about a 70-mile ride up into the mountains and everything that him and his wife do. And I've never done that before, which was interesting. Taking his Yamaha is like, I don't know, it's at least 400 pounds anyway, maybe a little more. And and then it's just you're higher up on the bike. And I've never done any off-road biking before, powered biking anyway, motorized biking. And so I was like nervous. I'm like, well, I also don't want to crash your bike, And he was like, nah, don't worry about it. I was like, I'm going to take his wife's. He's like, I'm taking my wife's bike because we want to sell hers eventually. It's an older BMW. You break one thing on it and it's like expensive to fix. Like the foot pegs are like $250. It's like, oh man, this is ridiculous,
Yeah.
So
Holy cow.
yeah, exactly. So he's like, if you're gonna crash anything, I'd rather have you crash my bike because the plastic side panel up on the gas tank area, like $125. If you do that on hers, $500. It's like, oh geez, So, and plus he bought that bike, rode it for about 4 months, and then carted himself out to Oregon and then rode cross country, mostly off road. So he goes, with that being said, you want to know how many times I laid that bike down and crashed that bike? And it's been like, we used to just live on its side, basically, So he goes, I honestly don't care if you lay the bike down. And he's like, I really don't care. He's like, if you total it, yeah, that's going to really suck. But just, don't worry about it. Like, I'd rather have you just like lay it down if it saves you from a serious situation, And he put all like the bars on the side and everything and the skid plates. And um, so anyway, when I'm done with this bike, I think that's the direction I'm going to go is get into a dual sport and at least something that's bigger that can get me on the highway, that can get me longer distance. And I have another friend that has one that's around here, to do something with, even if it means trailering it up to New Hampshire and then getting on some roads out there for a weekend or something like that, off-road stuff. But I think that would be the way, which would really, it'll be a tough decision to sell this bike. Mainly because, and it stinks. It's like, I'm not going to get a lot of money for it. I'm not getting my money back for it, especially with all the work I put into it. That's just the way that's going to go. But it would be tough from a sentimental standpoint. I don't hang on to a lot of stuff, but when I put my time and effort into it, it's tough to let go, to be like, well, I made that, So, um, and from a storage standpoint, I only got one spot for a bike. So that's how that's going to go, So
Sounds like you need to build a bigger garage.
uh, trust me, man, when I built this garage, I built it as big as I could. It's sandwiched in between my septic tank and the leaching field. I couldn't go any further back. So
Gotcha.
and I got plenty of room in the main garage, but that's my wood shop. So I guess I can't go too big,
Let's see. I just bought a shovel head this past winter
Mm.
from a buddy of mine, and he did woodworking. I didn't realize how bad sawdust got into everything.
Dude. So the way my garage is built, and again, I built it as big as I could. It's the same footprint as my house. So I just doubled the the building size on my property. But the main part of the garage is woodworking, and then off the back of the garage. So my garage is 24 by 30, and then I have an additional 10 feet back by 24 wide, and that's like the motorcycle, the lawnmower, and also to other random stuff. My mountain bikes are out there. But yeah, man. So I just have a regular single doorway going into that section, and even that section, which is not part of the main garage, the sawdust gets everywhere. And I don't have, and everything in my wood shop area, like wall space is maximized. So I can't have a door on there because I literally wouldn't be able to open the door because of the way it swings. I got a bandsaw right next to it, So I just hung a couple of bed sheets, one on each side, and I just close it up, and that literally keeps all the dust out. So, but you're right. Yeah, sawdust gets everywhere.
All right. So you're a high school shop teacher. I didn't realize that shop was still a thing. I thought you all were extinct. Like
That's
it's not very common to have shop in schools anymore, I don't think.
that's a very common comment that I get from a lot of people. Like they still have shops. So you're teaching a tech school, right? And I'm like, no, it's just a regular old high school, which is even more shocking when you get into the education world. It's just that, like they still have shop. Fortunately, my district is basically. I mean, I don't know if I'm calling them out in the public here, but I mean, they've been 10 years behind the times for a long time. Maybe not now, they're not, but in the past they have been. And so when everybody was getting rid of it because it was really expensive to run, it didn't seem like it was as useful anymore, which is an absurd, an absurd
Yeah.
excuse, um, everybody got rid of it. And then when we were thinking of getting rid of it, because we were building a new school, um, everybody was kind of like, oh, geez, we wish we could have shop again, but a startup cost is in the millions because just from getting all the equipment or specializing or building out the room just for that shop, it's a really expensive startup cost, and schools aren't going to go around and buy a bunch of used equipment, So, um, so for my sake, as far as my career, my district decided to keep it. I mean, I took over 1 year in the old school, and then my second year was in the new school because they were transitioning at the time, and the whole conversation was, well, we're building a new school. It's really expensive to keep that room. In the future, it's expensive. It's expensive to build that room out in the new school. It's a really large space. We could put like 4 classrooms there versus what he has, and the old guy is retiring, so maybe we should just not do it. And lucky for me, the right people stepped up and said, no, that's a really dumb idea. Like every school kind of has their thing. And I teach at East Bridgewater High School. And so Whitman Hanson, right up the street, they don't have shop, but they have a huge culinary section. It's like, oh, that's cool. Like you might not have shop, but like that's like another trade in itself, cooking. And so it's like East Bridgewater, like it's not just about the shop, but like one of our big special areas is woodworking and metalworking, and we have 2 full shops. And so I mentioned before my former shop teacher. Well, I graduated from East Bridgewater back in 2001, and I kind of randomly kept in touch with him. Not anything crazy, but I went to school for woodworking, and I was like, you know what? I want to teach woodworking. My shop teacher had the coolest job. I'm going to go to school. It's going to take me a couple of years. So I called him and I was like, yo, you've been teaching for a long time. Don't mean to say anything, but you ever thought about retiring anytime soon? That's literally the
you
conversation I
you
had with him.
talked him into retiring. God.
And
Nice.
he was like, well, he laughed. He was just like, hey, well, listen, I get it. He's a straightforward shop guy, like he would rather give it to you, yeah, be told just that or ask just that. And he goes, well, I was thinking about retiring next year. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to school for 2 years. If anything changes, let me know. And I kind of kept in touch with him and kind of told him how things were going. Didn't really realize what I was doing was really influencing him. I wasn't doing it on purpose. I wasn't like, come on, man, hang around a second year. Please do this for me. I was just kind of keeping in touch with him. And that's exactly what he did. He was going to retire in 1 year, and he hung around for 2 more years. And this is a cool story. He went to the school principal. He goes, I got a guy. I think he'll be perfect. He's brand new, so he'll be cheap. He's young. He'll want to stick around for a long time. And he's a former student. I think he'll be perfect for the job. If you hire him, I'll hang around. I'll do whatever I need to do to make sure he gets up to speed. I'll be in and out as much as he needs me to. But if you don't hire him, I'm going to strip the shop of all my stuff, and you're never going to see me again. And then he got up and he walked out of the principal's office. And like, it's kind of one of those things where he was a crusty old guy that had been there forever. And this is how it is, and he did just that, man. There was a lot of people that applied for the job that were kind of like, oh, this looks cool for like my retirement gig. They weren't really in it for a career like I was. where I am. And yeah, dude, he hung around as much as or as little. He's like, listen, if I'm overstepping my bounds, I'm like, no, 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 you can come in every single day if you want. I need all the help I can get. I've never taught before, you know. I know I'm hands on. My biggest fear was the kids. I didn't want to get eaten alive by the kids, you know. And I was like, geez, you know, I'm not like the quickest witted person. I'm like, they're gonna come at me, and what if I can't, like, you know, edge them out somehow? I found out real quick that all you need is one little thing, and they just shut down pretty quick. So
Well, and then being quick-witted, I feel like that's something you can probably learn. You know, if something works on one kid, that it'll work on another one too. You
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Oh, but that's really cool that he did that for you and stuck around and put in a good word for you.
Yeah, it's awesome, and he's still around, and it was worth it for him as well because then that means he still has a connection to a shop. I mean, he's got his own little shop set up in his garage or whatever, but he needs something. He needs a specialized machine, one little thing, or maybe there's a certain type of stock that I might have. He just needs a small piece, whatever. He just has that connection, and I had that connection because he was a metal worker and I was a woodworker, you know, so I'm a woodworker learning metalworking. The whole first half of my first year teaching, we did all the projects together during school, after school, and he just got me up to speed. And even today, I'm 12. This will be my. I just finished my 11th year teaching. I still have questions. Hey, on this machine, you know, we have South Bend lathes. Those are from the World War era, you know, and they were actually military surplus machines, but they still run like a top, you know. But
They're
if a
good
weird
quality.
yeah, exactly. If a weird noise is coming out, or if I'm trying to make something and I'm like, this is not my background, I call him up. He comes over. We run through it, and then there's a mandatory beer afterwards. And so it's just he's just a really good old school guy to keep in touch, and he does a lot of like steam engines and stuff. So he's still in it, and he still loves hearing my stories. And he has a here's another good line for you. I would tell him stories about, oh, this kid did this or this kid did that or whatever. And he goes, yep, the kids don't change, just the faces.
Right.
So, but man, I tell the kids all the time, I'm like, it's my career. This is what I meant to do. This is what I wanted to do. And it's the fastest job I've ever had. I mean, we start at 7:30. We're out by 2:15. I still have the whole rest of the day ahead of me. The days fly by. And so, I mean, I can't believe I'm already 11 years into it. So it's not bad when you have something that you love to do and that's your job. Not a bad thing.
Right. No, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So do you just do woodworking or do you do metalworking too, or is there a different teacher for metalworking?
No, it's all me. So we have two shops there. We have the wood and metal shop. So it's all one big shop. Back in the old school, we had two separate shops separated by a hallway, and it was just me. So if I wasn't in there, the door's locked. You can't be in there. So I'm teaching woodworking today. Tomorrow I'm teaching metalworking, but we're across the hall. Now it's one big shop. So speaking of dust, I was like, ooh, how's this going to work with like the metal lathes and the drill presses, which have oil all over them, you know? And surprisingly, the dust collection works pretty well. So I was going to like get covers for the machines when we weren't using them, but I haven't had one issue with dust building up in the oil. So that's good. But it is one big, massive shop, full wood shop, full metal shop, with a welding booth and and with a bunch of workbenches. So it's a big room, but not a lot of space. And unfortunately, they've jammed a lot of kids in there. So over the years, I've really gotten that number down a little bit. I've done a really good job with safety. But the problem is, like, when you get a million kids in there, it's like, well, only got like two welders, so only two people can be in there at a time when you have 20 kids trying to weld at once, you know? So um, I've done a pretty good job over the years of like breaking up the projects. So not everyone's trying to do the same thing at once. And so you just have to make it work, you know? And I tell the kids that we're not furniture makers. We're not, you know, metal. We're not making, I don't even know what you would want to call it. You know, I don't want to say we're not woodworkers or metal workers because that's what we're doing. But what we really are is we're problem solvers. And so, oh, I have a problem. I need a chair. I need a table. Cool. Let's solve that problem by building it. And in the process of building it, oh, I cut this too small, or I drilled the hole in the wrong spot. Oh, all right, that's a problem. Let's fix it. Let's solve it. Let's figure it out, And that I tell the kids that all the time with like, okay, this year we're going to try and do this because in the past it didn't work. So now I'm trying something different. I'm trying to get it so you guys are working more efficiently. And, you mentioned at the beginning, like, oh, is there anything that's off limits? It's not. I mean, I bring this into my personal life all the time as far as like what I do at home, projects I'm working on at home. I got woodworking projects about how to hang this charcuterie board in my back right here. Like I was like, oh, how do you hang that on the wall? Make a video for it. So the quiz was list 2 things you learned from that video. And I learned a lesson. Don't leave an open-ended question like that because what's on there is the date that my wife and I got married. And so the kids would say, I learned that Mr. Ferioli got married on December 28th. Like, okay, lesson learned.
Yeah.
So,
Good job,
um,
smart ass.
yeah, exactly. So so we have 2 shops. We have the wood metal shop, which is one big shop, and then across the hall we have graphic design and CAD. So the kids are still.
You teach that too?
No, I don't teach that. So there's
Okay.
2 teachers. There's another guy that teaches that. But I don't teach CAD, but we do use SolidWorks in my shop because I have a CNC router. So we're making signs and customizing the kids' woodworking projects. So with whatever, I mean, I guess I'm technically stealing logos off the internet, but hey, we're not selling them. We're just throwing them on kids' projects. So we use SolidWorks, but if the kids have a lot of experience from SolidWorks from across the hall, I can let them run with it. But for the most part, I try to keep the design simple, and I just do it for the kids. Because I only got one computer in the shop, and it's for that machine. So he's got 22 computers across the hall, and that's what he teaches. So again, it's cool to have that, though. I mean, that's out there. I mean, my brother does it right now. He draws kitchens for a company. So it's like there's a need out there for people for drafting. There's a need for graphic design. I mean, we just talked about it. It's like, if I got big enough, I could have my own video editor. That's like people do that. So yeah, it's cool that we still have that. We offer that as an elective at the school, and gives a chance to it gives a chance for the kids to get out there and do something creative. Otherwise, it's read it in a book or learn it off of YouTube. But YouTube only goes so far. You got to be able to put it into practice.
Right. And having someone like yourself there to kind of hold their hand through it, that's my biggest thing is like I can watch YouTube videos all day long, but having someone go, yeah, what he's talking about here is actually this here and kind of,
Right.
Guiding you along.
Right.
So that's cool. With kid, I don't know how old your kids are. I have teenagers, so they constantly have the screen to their face.
Yeah.
With you teaching high school, do you find it an issue to keep kids interested in using their hands to build stuff? Because I
Yeah.
trying to get my kids to come out into the garage and do anything is a chore in itself.
Yeah, it's tough. My kids are 1 and 2.5, so real young.
Whoa, you started late, bud.
I did. Um, but they're cool, man. And so from a parenting standpoint, from a teaching and parenting standpoint, it's like, ooh, I see what I don't like from kids getting older, and I see what I do like from kids getting older. And of course, I'm teaching all walks of life, all different home lives, from great home lives to poor home lives to whatever habits they have, and so yeah. So I mean, a side note, as far as my kids are concerned, like I'm trying to like nip that stuff in the bud now, and I was just at a family party today, and they're like, "Oh, geez, like we wish we started our kids earlier on bikes. Like, how'd you get them to learn?" I'm like, honestly, they just follow whatever you do. So if you're doing that kind of stuff at a young age, and I mountain bike, so he sees me on my bike, he just wants to do what daddy's doing.
Right.
So he's 2.5, and he's on his balance bike, ripping it up in the driveway. And that's awesome. With no training wheels. So, but as far as the kids at school, Yeah, man, it is tough. Like, I don't know how some of these kids don't have neck issues. They're just hunched over their phone the whole time, you know? So, um, yeah, I get, it's tough. In what it offends me sometimes, but it also doesn't. I have to understand that my class is an elective class, and everybody's like, "Oh, cool, so they choose to be in there." Well, yes and no.
It's an easy
Sometimes they,
credit, they think.
yeah, sometimes they have to be in there because that's what fits in their schedule, and they need that. They need an elective at some point, and they can't take art or music or business because it just doesn't fit in their schedule. So my class fits in their schedule, and so I'm like, yeah, well, you guys want to be here, and they're like, well, I didn't even choose this, and I'm in here, and it's like, okay, well, first lesson, you're gonna have to do stuff in life you don't like, but you just get through it, and then you can move on. So lesson number one, and I go, and I tell the kids all the time, I'm like, I promise you, like, I'm making this as fun as possible, and this is probably gonna be, not that I'm the best teacher in the world or I'm the most fun guy in the school, but I'm pretty well relaxed. The class is relaxed. Everybody's working. If you're working in an English class, can you be high-fiving your friend and talking and telling jokes? No, it's usually pretty quiet. And but that's that class, and that's fine. That's what it needs to be. And so I try to make it fun for everybody, even if they're not there. But I tell you, man, these kids, I don't know what's like. I try to make them understand, like, you don't know how lucky you have it in this classroom right now versus other schools, versus what you're going to learn for the rest of your life. Even if you're not a metal worker, even if you're not a woodworker, I'm like, dude, like, your hinges on your cellar door are going to loosen up one day, and your screw is going to strip out. Like, and if you don't know how to use a screwdriver or don't even know what a screwdriver is, you can fix that with one little simple thing. And this is all it is exposure. And but it's a battle, man. Like, every school, if I talk to teachers around the state, even around the country, sometimes I've met some people and they're like, "Oh, I've tried this, I've tried that," and sometimes it's sticking. We've had on the back of a door, it looks like a shoe rack, like a cloth shoe rack, whatever, but it's numbered, little pouches. Everybody put your phone in at the beginning of class, and you can get it at the end. And it's like, hey, how come you didn't put your phone up there? Oh, I don't have a phone. And then halfway through, you see them, like, their eyeballs are going down, they're sneaking it through their pocket, whatever. And so at some point, what I've done, and this is just my technique, is that I kind of meet them halfway. I'm like, listen, the rule is if your phone is out, I can actually take it and I can, you can get in trouble for it. It's not going to be that way. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to learn independence in this class big time. And I need you to be independent because I can't hold everybody's hand all at once. Nothing will get done here. I was like, from a safety standpoint, if you need me, okay, just don't go off on your own. I'm not telling you to go off on your own. Next thing you know, you're breaking stuff and things are happening and people are getting injured. But you need to like, it's time management. You need to learn time management. If you're in your phone the whole time, but you have stuff to do and the machine is open or I'm available or there's nothing holding you back from doing your work and you're on your phone, you're going to get a bad grade. And I do my best to circulate. And if they ask me a question and I don't get to them because I'm super busy, well, that's on me. That's not on them. They get out of their seat. They did what they were supposed to do, but they really need help with the next step. And I'm getting swamped. It is what it is. But when you get the kid, I've had kids, I've stood over them. Put your phone away and let's go work. I'm going to not help anybody today. I'm just going to help you because you're so far behind because your face is in your phone. Sometimes they won't even look at me. They just, yep. And that's it. They don't do any work. They don't do anything. So I don't know if it's I don't like this. I had a kid just this last year tell me, your class is boring, so that's why I'm not doing any work. And I said, that's okay. If you don't like woodworking, that's fine. But I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to fail the class. So, the problem is I also see him at the local grocery store like every day. And I'm like, you work at Trukey's. If they give you a job you don't like doing, what do you tell them? I'm not going to do this. I don't like this. What's their next response? Okay, bye. Like,
Yeah.
here I can't kick you out of class, but you can fail the class. So you might as well, and it's not forever. It's just till the end of the school year. So you might as well just, do something, get a grade, and then that's it. You don't have to take my class again. You chose to just sit. I'm like, you're bored because you're not doing anything, dude. Like, and I can't, there's only so much forcing I can do. And then I can't just build the project for them. So, um, So it's tough. I mean, it's not even a phone thing, honestly, dude. I mean, they get their face in their phone and that's fine, but I don't know what it is nowadays. Like I was when I was building my garage, I had the guy come out and help me dig a trench with his machine. He was backfilling the foundation, dig a trench for my electrical to go out there. So I got in the trench with a shovel while he was around me with the bucket, and I was like laying wire down. I was doing all sorts of stuff, and he's like, "What are you doing in the summertime?" I was like, "Oh, not much." He goes, "You want to work for me?" I go, "No, I don't want to use a shovel all summertime." And he's like, "Man, I can't find any kids that want to work, you know, like." So it's not just a phone thing; it's a motivation thing, and I say that and it's like, wow, geez, that sounds frustrating. Well, I'd say that's like 5, 6% of my population. Then I have kids that are lazy, but will get up and do the work when prompted. Then I get the kids that are just like, what's next? What's next? What's next? Okay, I'm done with term one. Okay, I'm done with term two. I'm done with term three. I'm like, you're done with term three. It's only term one. Like they fly and they love it and they can't get enough. And those are like, it's so awesome when I can tell a kid, okay, this is the next step. You're going to go over to the bandsaw. You're going to cut it to this side. You're going to sand it down. Then you're going to weld those two pieces together. And they go, okay. And then they just walk away and they do exactly that. It's like, and they like understand what I'm saying. And so that's what makes the job really, really fun. But it's also really fun to take a kid that wants nothing to do with the class and they don't realize it, but halfway through the school year, they're over on the table saw by themselves, which is one of the most dangerous tools in the shop. I have to remind them, remember when you came in here and you like didn't even want to come close to the machine to do anything, and now you just made that cut? I know it doesn't seem like it was much to you, but that's huge. And that's really, really cool to see the progress. Um, and so anyway, but long story short, it's a huge problem that every teacher in every part of the country has a problem. I'm taking graduate classes right now, and I wrote a paper on it, and there's no shortage of information out there about techniques and kids and their phones and all this kind of stuff. So it's difficult. It's difficult from a parenting standpoint. It's difficult from a teaching standpoint.
It's yeah. Not I mean, I just use screens as an example, but like you said, the motivation factor, and I'm huge working with my hands. Like
Yeah.
I've been a welder for almost 20 years now, and I'm just now learning CNC machining. So working with my hands and building bikes and stuff like that is really cool to me. And it's I've worked with kids, and well, I say kids, they're adults, but they're teenagers, they're kids to me, and worked with them in shops that I've been in, and it's just like they just don't give a shit,
Yeah.
and they don't really want to learn anything, they don't want to know anything, and it's like, man, just you know, I don't know, it's just a generational thing, I guess. I sound like an old man right now saying that shit, but it's I couldn't imagine being a teacher and teaching a skilled trade like you do, and having to try to teach these kids, which they're forced to be in your class. Some of them are, but
Mm.
um and I guess I just couldn't. That'd be really difficult for me to do.
It's not. We had a group chat between my friends and I, and somebody was complaining about a kid doing something, and I go, "Welcome to my world." And he was like, "Whatever, you chose to be a teacher." And I was like, "Well, I also chose to work 182 days a year." He didn't respond to
Right.
that. So no, it's difficult. I mean, everybody's like, "Oh, you're lucky you only work halfway." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, you could be a teacher." And they're like, "Oh, I couldn't do that." And I'm like, "Exactly. Not everybody's cut out to do it. It's you got to be patient. Um, and even if you're patient, it's just there's a lot going on. And I'll be honest, I'm not the most organized guy at all. Um, I do it. I'm enough to make it work. And I had another point to this, what I was going to lead into here, but yeah, it's tough, but I really enjoy it. The kids get something out of it. And I'll be honest, like, yeah, it's a generational thing. And it's like, oh, like I didn't grow up with these phones. I grew up with 007, which was like awesome, but I grew up before that even came out. So I had like an outdoor passion that my dad like instilled in my brother and I. And then all of a sudden video games came around, but I had like a love for both because I could shut it off and go outside and do stuff. Um, And I'll be honest with you, man, like the phone, like I fall victim to just getting in there and scrolling or playing a stupid game on there that means nothing. And
That's how you got on this podcast. It's great.
that's, I mean, I owe like the Facebook thing to help me. I mean, it is super helpful. I mean, um, it's just a power right on your fingertips or whatever. But yeah, we can all fall victim to just useless, mindless staring at it. You know, it's not the best thing in the world, but sometimes I refer to it as stupid phones because they're kind of making us stupid in a way. I mean, my spelling goes right out the window when it autocorrects everything for me. So,
Yep.
so, um, so yeah, so it's tough, but there's a time and a place for it, just like everything. And what do they say? Everything in moderation, I guess, for the most part. So,
Yep. So, all right, I got just one last question for you, man.
sure.
Any plans to try and incorporate a motorcycle build into your classes?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, here's the tough part about where I teach. Because it's a public high school, it's not a tech high school, which means we really don't physically have the space for this, So all my projects are pretty small projects because like we don't have a room to build like some places are building sheds, that kind of stuff. Every inch of that room is either a little bit of space for kids to walk around the machines and then their benches, or there's machines and benches, so it is like I don't have a large fabrication area. um, I have one little spot in the metal shop, but and one thing I was going to do this winter was bring my lawnmower in, my riding lawnmower, and like buy a bunch of parts and have some independent study kids that I have, which are like the best of the best kids, tear it apart and like redo some stuff on it. But the problem is like, and I use a lot of my motorcycle videos for quizzes, and the kids like that. And I'll ride the bike to school, and they see it out there, and they're like, "Oh, that's cool!" Like, "Oh yeah, I watch the videos." And some kids follow me, so they get a notification when I post a new video. Um, but the reality is, it's literally a space issue to like bring something in. And even if I brought one thing in and had one class work on it, when you have 20 kids in a class, it's kind of tough. I suppose I could be like, okay, two or three of you are going to work on this part. Two or three of you are going to work on this part. And I could set it up that way. If I was going to do that, I'd have to have a little bit more knowledge on it, on like every little part, break it all down, that kind of stuff.
Well, you were talking about building a sissy bar, so I'm thinking, yeah, you could have a group build a sissy bar. You got ladies
Right.
in there, have someone turn down some foot pegs and whatnot. Have
Yep.
another group build handlebars, and you look up TJ Brutal for his hardtail kit. I'm going to talk you into hardtailing that bike. Then you can have one of the kids make a hardtail kit for you.
Yep. So what I would need to do is say I had like my metals 2 class, which is just in, the upper level class, mostly juniors and seniors. If I could have a spot, an exterior spot to like store the bike, out of the class, so it wouldn't take up much room, but be able to like wheel it in and be like, okay, today we're working on this stuff. Then, because I tell you, man, when I have the kids do something for me, or if I get an outside project come in from the town, and I'm like, okay, it'll take X amount of time to do this, but I say, okay, go over there and take this apart and do this. Like in one class, it's like, oh, cool. Well, they got a lot of work done. Oh, this is actually not so bad. Like when you have 2 or 3 kids working on it and then they come back and I've been busy teaching everybody else, a lot of work gets done pretty quickly. And so it wouldn't be a bad idea. Again, it's a storage thing. If I could not have it in the way for most of the time, but be able to bring it in, maybe I'll talk the school into building a small shed outside for me. That'd be pretty sweet. Um, but yeah, if I could look into it and have something that each little group of kids could do, um, then it would work for sure. Because what would be cool is like, all right, we want to do this. Well, some kids aren't going to want to build the sissy bar, or some kids aren't going to want to work on certain sections or do whatever it is. And but if I can find one little thing, even if a kid was just like, I don't really like to do this, okay, but you like doing graphics and all that kind of stuff, right? Or drawing, design something up when we go to paint it or something like that. But we have over across the hall in the graphics area, we have vinyl cutters, we have custom printers, we have all sorts of stuff that we could, you know, dress it up later when it's done, you know? So there's more than just the welding part of it or wrench turning, you know? So, custom paint job, if they wanted to literally hand paint something on there, you know, and make it the school bike. And then as long as it's cool and rideable and I certify it and it can get inspected, then maybe it's one of those things where it gets auctioned off at the end of the year or something like that, you know? Um, I don't know. You raised a good question. I've never thought of that before.
That'd be really cool. Really cool.
Yep.
All right, man. Hell, we went an hour and 20. Nice.
It's easy to get going on passionate topics, you know?
Right. Right. So you got anything you want to plug? You said the YouTube channel. I'll link it in the show notes, but go ahead and say it.
Yeah, I mean, the YouTube channel doesn't have any special name. It's just my name, Mark Ferioli. So if you look that up, or if you just look up, you know, Honda Shadow 600 or, you know, whatever that kind of stuff is, it's bound to come up. My avatar is Homer Simpson. So, you know, if you see somebody's avatar as Homer Simpson, that's me, you know? So,
Do you have an Instagram?
I do, but I don't even post anything up there. It's just, again, under my name. Actually, my, okay. My other kid just got home. So I have an Instagram. It's just it's under Joe Fish Beard, if that makes sense. And that's just an alias that I had. Now I'm putting myself out there if any students listen to this, but it's just my name was out there, and the next thing you know, I started getting friend requests and all sorts of weird stuff when I first started teaching. But I don't really post a ton of stuff on that. It's kind of funny how that works. The only thing I post on social media regarding to motorcycle stuff is either to Honda Shadow Customs Facebook page or on my YouTube channel. I guess this just goes into like, this is just something I started doing on a whim. And so it takes a lot of time to dedicate to like going online, posting stuff, answering questions, maybe making things look a little nicer. I'm like, I just want to make a video, put some information out there, and then that's it, you know? So I don't advertise a lot. I honestly wish I had more time to do it, but
You got the whole summer off. What are you talking about?
I know, but I got a million hobbies, and sometimes it's like I don't have I don't have the patience for it sometimes either. I'm just like, you know what? I do, you know what I make a lot as far as woodworking is I make a ton of cornhole boards. So I'm in the process of making a cornhole board video. And even that kind of annoys me. I'm like, oh, I just want to make this board and be done with it. But no, I'm forcing myself to like videotape the process, you know? So,
Yep. No, I
but,
know how that goes.
but yeah, man, I mean, that video, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, like I try to be as honest as I can. I mean, there can be a lot of critics out there, but I don't, I don't do this stuff professionally. I'm probably not doing stuff correctly. I know it works, or efficiently, but sometimes it just needs to work, you know? So
Right.
yeah.
Well, very cool, man. I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and talk with me.
No, that's awesome. I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know what he's looking for people, but I'll throw my name out there and see if it sticks. And it's no, it's cool. I just like talking about it, you know, and hopefully people. I haven't even started. I mean, this is so quick when you were like, oh, how about Saturday night? I was like, oh, okay, that was quicker than I thought. I haven't even had a chance to listen to your other podcasts yet, so I'm looking forward to see
Don't.
what they have to say.
They're terrible. They're terrible. Don't listen to them. So.
Oh, what does that say about me? I mean,
Nah. No, I had my brother on the first time for the first episode just to get comfortable doing it and whatnot. And that's what I told him. I was like, I'm getting the shitty guest out of the way first before I have more refined guests on. And he's like, wow, you're setting the bar really low there. So no,
that's
it's a
cool.
good time.
Cool. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
All right.
All right, talk to you later.
Sounds good.